I still remember the warmth of that summer evening, the sound of laughter floating through my sister Lily's backyard, and the sweet scent of the birthday cake I'd spent hours perfecting. It was supposed to be a perfect celebration for her 30th birthday. None of us could have imagined how that night would change everything. How, in a single moment, my world would shatter like the champagne flute that slipped from my fingers when I saw the message on my husband's phone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Emma Mitchell, 32 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had built a good life for myself in suburban Boston. I own a small but successful bakery that I started from scratch 5 years ago, working 16-hour days and pouring every penny of my savings into it. My husband Mark and I had been married for 7 years, and while we weren't wealthy by any means, we were comfortable. At least that's what I believed. The day had started like any other. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. to prepare special pastries for the morning rush at my bakery, Sweet Foundations. Mark was still asleep when I left, as usual. He worked as a financial advisor at a mid-sized firm downtown, with more reasonable hours than mine. I had taken the afternoon off to prepare for Lily's birthday dinner, something I'd been planning for weeks. My sister had always been there for me, especially after our parents died in a car accident 4 years ago, leaving us with only each other as family. "Emma, these decorations are amazing," Lily exclaimed as she walked into her transformed backyard. I had strung fairy lights across the patio, set up a table with her favourite flowers, purple hydrangeas, and prepared a feast that included all her favourite foods. "Only the best for the birthday girl," I replied, hugging her tightly. At 5'3", my sister was petite compared to my 5'7" frame, but what she lacked in height, she made up for in personality. Her auburn hair caught the early evening sunlight as she surveyed the setup with delight. Mark arrived 45 minutes late, claiming he'd been caught in a meeting that ran over. I noticed immediately that he seemed tense, his usually easy smile strained at the edges. He hugged Lily briefly, handed her a hastily wrapped gift, and made a beeline for the bar I'd set up. "Everything okay?" I asked, placing a hand on his arm. He flinched slightly. "Just work stress," he muttered, pouring himself a generous measure of whiskey. "Henderson's account is a nightmare right now." I nodded sympathetically, though something in his demeanour made me uneasy. Mark had always been an open book to me, or so I thought. That night, he seemed to be reading from a different page entirely. Lily's boyfriend Tyler arrived next, followed by a few close friends. The evening progressed pleasantly enough with good food, flowing drinks, and the kind of comfortable conversation that happens among people who know each other well. As I brought out the 3-tiered lavender-infused cake I'd baked, everyone gathered around to sing Happy Birthday. I noticed Mark checking his phone repeatedly under the table, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. It was while serving cake that I realised Mark had disappeared. After distributing slices to everyone, I went looking for him, assuming he'd stepped inside to use the bathroom. The house was quiet, the sound of the party muffled through the sliding glass doors. I checked the bathroom. Empty. The guest bedroom. Nothing. Finally, I heard his voice coming from the kitchen, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "I can't just leave now. I know. Look, we'll figure it out tomorrow. Yes, I've got the papers. I'm at a birthday party, for God's sake." I stepped into the doorway and Mark's head snapped up. He ended the call abruptly. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual despite the knot forming in my stomach. "Henderson," he said quickly. "Client emergency." I nodded, but something felt off. Mark had always shared details of his work troubles with me before, often using me as a sounding board. This secretive behaviour was new. "Your cake is waiting," I said, gesturing toward the patio. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Lead the way." We rejoined the party, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Mark seemed to relax after another drink, putting his phone away and engaging more with our friends. By the time we were opening gifts, the tension I'd sensed earlier had mostly dissipated, and I told myself I was being paranoid. Lily loved the vintage turntable I'd found for her at an estate sale, knowing her passion for vinyl records. "Emma, this is perfect," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "You always know exactly what I want." Mark's gift was a generic scented candle set that I knew he must have picked up on the way over. Lily thanked him politely, but I could see her disappointment. I made a mental note to talk to Mark about it later. He usually put more thought into gifts. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I started cleaning up while Lily and Tyler said their goodbyes. Mark offered to help, collecting empty glasses and bringing them to the kitchen where I was loading the dishwasher. "That went well," I said, trying to gauge his mood. "Yeah, it was nice," he replied absently, placing glasses on the counter. His phone buzzed again, and he pulled it from his pocket. I wouldn't have seen the message if he hadn't angled the screen slightly in my direction as he read it. But there it was, clear as day, a preview of a text from Diana W. "Papers are ready. Mum's lawyer says we need to move quickly before she suspects anything." I froze. A plate suspended halfway to the dishwasher. Diana W. My mother-in-law's name was Diana Mitchell. Why would she be texting about papers and lawyers? And who was the she they needed to move quickly before? A cold feeling washed over me as the obvious answer presented itself. They were talking about me. The champagne flute I was holding slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the tile floor. Mark jumped, hurriedly pocketing his phone. "Careful," he said, reaching for the broom in the pantry. "I'll get that." I stood immobile, my mind racing. "Who was that text from?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Just work stuff," Mark said dismissively, sweeping up the shards of glass. "From Diana W.?" I pressed, watching his face carefully. His movements faltered for just a second before he recovered. "Diana Whitman. New client." The lie hung in the air between us. In 7 years of marriage, I'd never caught Mark in such an obvious deception. His mother, Diana Mitchell, was a wealthy widow who had never approved of me. She'd made it clear from the beginning that she thought Mark was settling by marrying a baker with no family money or connections. But we'd always presented a united front against her thinly veiled disapproval. Or at least, I thought we had. "What papers was she referring to?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Mark straightened up, his expression hardening. "You read my messages? That's a violation of privacy, Emma." The deflection was so transparent it would have been laughable if my heart wasn't pounding so painfully in my chest. "The message popped up, Mark. I saw it by accident. What papers are you and your mother working on that I'm not supposed to know about?" He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing before. Now it seemed calculated, buying him time to formulate another lie. "It's not what you think," he began, the most cliched line in the history of marital deception. "What do I think?" I countered, crossing my arms. Before he could answer, Lily appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay in here? I heard something break." I forced a smile. "Just a glass. We've got it under control." Lily looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. "If you're sure." "We're fine," Mark assured her with a smile that appeared genuine to anyone who didn't know him as well as I did. "Great party, Lily. Happy birthday." She nodded, still looking concerned, but retreated to the living room where Tyler was waiting. I turned back to Mark, lowering my voice. "We'll discuss this at home." The drive back to our townhouse in Somerville was silent. Mark attempted small talk once or twice, commenting on the party and how well the food had turned out, but I responded with monosyllables until he gave up. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what might be happening. What kind of papers would Mark and his mother be preparing behind my back? Property papers? Investment documents? Or the possibility that made my stomach clench, divorce papers? When we arrived home, I walked straight to our small home office and turned on the computer. Mark followed me, hovering in the doorway. "What are you doing?" he asked, an edge of panic in his voice. "Checking our joint accounts," I replied flatly. "Emma, it's nearly midnight. Can't this wait until tomorrow? We're both tired." "I'm wide awake," I said, logging into our online banking portal. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Our checking account had the expected balance, about $7,200. The savings account showed $32,450, which was actually a bit more than I remembered. I was just starting to think maybe I'd overreacted when I noticed a new account listed under Mark's name only, one I'd never seen before. "What's this account?" I asked, pointing to the screen. Mark's face paled. "It's nothing. Just a personal account I opened recently." I clicked on it, but access was denied. I didn't have viewing permissions. "How much is in it?" He hesitated. "Not much, a few thousand." "Show me," I demanded. With visible reluctance, Mark leaned over me and logged into the account. The balance read 147,035.22. The room seemed to tilt around me. "Where did this money come from?" I whispered. Mark stepped back, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "It's my money, Emma, from my inheritance when Dad died. Your inheritance was $80,000, and we put it toward the down payment on this house 3 years ago," I said, my voice shaking. "Try again." He sighed heavily, dropping into the chair beside me. "It's complicated." "I've got all night," I replied coldly. Mark ran both hands over his face, then looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, calculation mixed with resignation. "Mum thinks I made a mistake marrying you," he said finally. "She's been saying it for years." Though this wasn't news to me, hearing him say it so bluntly still hurt. "And you?" "I love you, Emma. But—" He trailed off, and that "but" hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "But what?" I prompted, my heart hammering. "But our lives have taken different directions. You're always at the bakery, we barely see each other, and financially we're stuck. Mum wants more for me. She's getting older, and she wants to see me settled properly before—" He trailed off again. "Before she dies and leaves you her fortune." I finished for him, disgust rising in my throat. "So what are these papers she mentioned? Divorce papers?" He shook his head. "Not exactly. It's a business opportunity. Mum is helping me buy into a partnership at Riverside Financial. It's a much bigger firm, with serious clients. The buy-in is $250,000. "And where does that leave me?" I asked, though I was beginning to see the picture clearly. "The thing is," Mark continued, not meeting my eyes, "the partners at Riverside are traditional. They expect a certain image. Mum thinks—" "I don't care what your mother thinks," I cut in sharply. "What do you think, Mark? Do you think your baker wife isn't good enough for your fancy new colleagues?" His silence was answer enough. "The papers," I pressed. "What are they?" He sighed again. "A postnuptial agreement, separating our finances completely. The house would be transferred solely to my name, and in exchange you'd get a lump sum to do whatever you want with. Start a new bakery somewhere else, maybe." The betrayal was so absolute that for a moment I couldn't breathe. 7 years of marriage, the business I'd built, our home, all of it to be discarded because I didn't fit the image his mother wanted for him. "How long have you been planning this?" I managed to ask. "A few months," he admitted. "Since Mum's health scare in February. Diana had been hospitalised briefly for high blood pressure, turning what had been a minor medical issue into a dramatic production. Apparently, it had also been the catalyst for this scheme. And the money in this account? Where did it really come from?" Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Mum has been transferring it to me, for the partnership buy-in." "So you've been secretly accepting large sums of money from your mother, planning to push me out of our home, all while pretending everything was normal between us." The magnitude of the deception was staggering. "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "I was going to talk to you once everything was in place, offer you a fair settlement." I laughed bitterly. How generous. "And I suppose your mother's lawyer was helping ensure this fair settlement was as favourable to you as possible." He didn't deny it. I stood up abruptly, needing space between us. "I need some air." Mark reached for my arm. "Emma, wait. We can discuss this rationally. There's no need to be emotional." I jerked away from his touch. "Emotional? My husband and mother-in-law have been conspiring behind my back to essentially buy me out of my own marriage, and you're telling me not to be emotional?" "That's not fair," he said, his voice hardening. "I've supported your bakery dream for years, even though it's never going to make real money. I've lived in this tiny house when Mum offered us something better because you insisted on being independent. I've compromised again and again." His words struck like physical blows. "Supported my dream. You've belittled it at every turn. When are you going to hire more staff, Emma? Why do you have to go in so early? Emma. Can't someone else handle the weekend shifts, Emma? And now I find out you've been plotting with your mother to toss me aside like yesterday's stale bread." "That's not—" he began, but I cut him off. "I want you out of this house tonight," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Go stay with your precious mother while you figure out your next move." Mark's expression shifted from defensive to incredulous. "You can't kick me out of my own house." "Our house," I corrected. "And yes, I can. Unless you want me to call Lily and Tyler right now and tell them exactly what you and Diana have been planning. I'm sure Tyler would find it fascinating, given that he's a reporter for the Boston Globe. Family financial scandal involving the son of prominent socialite Diana Mitchell. That would make quite a story. It was a bluff. Tyler would never publish something so personal, but Mark didn't know that. His face paled. "You wouldn't." "Try me," I challenged, pulling out my phone. "One call." We stared at each other for a long, tense moment before he looked away. "Fine. I'll get some things and go to Mum's." "But this conversation isn't over, Emma. Be reasonable. The post-nuptial agreement could benefit both of us." I said nothing, watching coldly as he packed an overnight bag. 20 minutes later, he was gone, and I was alone in the house we'd bought together, the house he'd been planning to take from me. I sank onto the couch, the reality of the situation finally hitting me full force. My marriage was over. My husband had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. And his mother, who had always regarded me as an interloper, was finally getting her wish. I cried until there were no tears left, then sat in numb silence as the first light of dawn crept through the windows. By the time I needed to leave for the bakery, I had made 2 decisions. I would not let Mark and Diana Mitchell destroy what I had built, and I would not go down without a fight. The familiar routine of the bakery was my salvation that morning. Kneading dough, measuring ingredients with precision, transforming flour and sugar into something beautiful. These actions grounded me when everything else in my life was spinning out of control. My assistant manager, Zoe, noticed something was wrong but didn't press when I said I didn't want to talk about it. By noon, the initial shock had worn off enough for me to think strategically. I called Lily during my lunch break. "Emma, is everything okay? You and Mark seemed tense last night," she said as soon as she answered. "No, everything is not okay," I replied, and proceeded to tell her everything I'd discovered. Lily listened without interrupting, though I could hear her sharp intake of breath at several points. "That absolute bastard," she said when I finished. "And Diana, I always knew she was a snake, but this is a new low." "I don't know what to do, Lily," I admitted, the vulnerability in my voice surprising even me. "The house is in both our names, but if he's been working with a lawyer, who knows what they've been plotting? And the bakery, it's doing well, but not well enough that I could buy him out of the house if it comes to that." "First things first," Lily said, her tone shifting to the practical problem solver I'd relied on since childhood. "You need a lawyer, a good one, and you need to protect yourself financially before they make another move." She was right, of course. Despite the emotional devastation, I couldn't afford to fall apart. Too much was at stake. "Tyler's sister is a divorce attorney," Lily continued. "Melissa Henderson. She's supposed to be brilliant. Let me call her right now and see if she can see you today." I glanced at the clock. "I'm at the bakery until 6. I'll see if she can do an evening appointment. In the meantime, you should gather any financial documents you can find. And Emma, change your passwords." "For everything." After we hung up, I took Lily's advice and changed every password I could think of. Email, social media, online banking for my personal account, even the Netflix account. Then, I called my bank and placed a temporary freeze on the joint checking account, citing suspicious activity. It wasn't much, but it felt like taking back a small measure of control. 3 hours later, Lily texted that Melissa could see me at 7 p.m. I closed the bakery promptly at 6, something I rarely did, and drove straight to the law offices of Henderson and Associates in downtown Boston. Melissa Henderson was a sharp-featured woman in her early 40s with a no-nonsense demeanour that I found immediately reassuring. Her office was elegant but not ostentatious, with degrees and certifications displayed on one wall and family photos on another, a subtle message that she understood both professional excellence and personal values. "Lily filled me in on the basics," she said after introductions were complete, "but I'd like to hear the full story from you." I recounted everything. From the text message I'd seen to the confrontation with Mark and the discovery of the secret account. Melissa listened attentively, occasionally making notes. "Let me be clear about this," she said when I finished. "Your husband has been accepting large sums of money from his mother, apparently with the intention of buying into a business partnership. He's been working with a lawyer to draft a postnuptial agreement that would remove your name from your home's deed and essentially pay you to leave. All of this was planned without your knowledge or consent. Is that correct?" Put so baldly, the betrayal seemed even more stark. "Yes." Melissa nodded grimly. "Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. That means in a divorce, marital assets are divided equitably, which doesn't necessarily mean equally. However, the secret account and the deceptive behaviour will not look good to a judge, especially if we can prove he was planning to pressure you into a postnuptial agreement that heavily favoured him." "What should I do now?" I asked. "First, don't move out of the house no matter what. Leaving can sometimes be construed as abandonment, which can affect property division. Second, I'm going to file an emergency motion to freeze all marital assets, including that secret account. The transfers from his mother could potentially be considered marital property since they occurred during the marriage." "Can we do that?" "Freeze his mother's money?" I asked, surprised. "If we can demonstrate that the funds were intended for marital use, like buying a house that would benefit both of you, then yes. At minimum, we can create enough legal complications that they'll have to negotiate with us." Melissa's smile was thin and predatory. "Third, I want you to document everything. Every conversation, every text, every relevant financial transaction you can remember. Start a journal tonight and work backwards as far as you can." "What about the bakery?" I asked. "It's in my name only, but I started it during our marriage. Is he entitled to part of it?" "Potentially." "Yes," Melissa acknowledged, "but we can argue that its value is primarily due to your labour and expertise. Plus, if he's been downplaying its importance while simultaneously plotting to advance his own career at your expense, that works in our favour." By the time I left Melissa's office an hour later, I had a concrete plan and a retainer agreement. The $5,000 initial payment would strain my personal savings, but it felt like an investment in my future. A future I was suddenly determined to control. That night, I did as Melissa suggested, and began documenting everything I could remember about our financial history. Mark's attitude toward my business, and Diana's interference in our marriage. As I wrote, patterns emerged that I'd been too close to see before. How Mark had gradually withdrawn his emotional support for my bakery, despite its growing success. How family gatherings at Diana's always included subtle digs about my career choice. How discussions about having children had always ended with Mark saying, "Not until we're more financially stable," despite our comfortable, if modest, lifestyle. I slept fitfully that night, alone in our bed, my mind racing with questions and plans. The next morning, Saturday, I was at the bakery by 5 a.m, earlier than usual. Work had always been my refuge, and now, more than ever, I needed the comfort of my kitchen, the certainty of recipes that, when followed precisely, yielded predictable results. I was elbow-deep in bread dough when my phone rang at 8:30. It was Mark. "Emma, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "I just got a call from the bank. The joint account is frozen. What did you do?" "Protected myself," I replied calmly, continuing to knead. "Just like you've been doing for months, apparently." "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're overreacting. I told you I was going to talk to you about everything once the details were worked out." "You mean once you and your mother had everything arranged so I'd have no choice but to accept whatever crumbs you offered?" I countered. "No, thank you. I've retained a lawyer, Mark. Any further communication should go through her." There was a moment of stunned silence before he exploded. "A lawyer? Already? Jesus, Emma, we're still married. We can work this out between us without getting lawyers involved." "Like you and your mother were working things out with her lawyer?" I asked pointedly. "I'm done being the only one who doesn't know what's happening in my own marriage. Melissa Henderson is my attorney. Have your lawyer contact her." I ended the call before he could respond, my hands shaking slightly but my resolve stronger than ever. Within an hour, Lily arrived at the bakery with coffee and a fiercely protective expression. "How are you holding up?" she asked, watching me frost cupcakes with mechanical precision. "Surprisingly okay," I replied, and realised it was true. The initial devastation had been replaced by a cold determination. "I'm angry, Lily. Really angry, but also relieved in a way. Like I finally understand why things have felt off for months." Lily nodded, leaning against the counter. "I never liked the way Mark deferred to his mother. Remember when you wanted to go to Santa Fe for your anniversary, and suddenly he had that unmissable conference in Cape Cod, just coincidentally where Diana has her summer home?" I did remember, though at the time I'd accepted his explanation without question. Now, looking back, there were dozens of similar incidents where Mark had prioritised his mother's wishes over mine, always with a plausible excuse. "I've been blind," I said softly. "No," Lily corrected firmly. "You've been trusting. There's a difference. Mark's the one who should be ashamed, not you." The bakery door chimed, and I looked up, expecting a customer. Instead, Diana Mitchell swept in, impeccably dressed in a cream silk blouse and tailored navy slacks, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. At 65, she was still strikingly beautiful in a cold, patrician way. "Emma," she said, her voice carrying the slight South Boston accent she'd never quite managed to erase despite decades in higher society. "We need to talk." Lily straightened, stepping slightly in front of me in a protective gesture that warmed my heart. "This isn't a good time, Mrs. Mitchell. Emma's working." Diana's gaze flickered dismissively over Lily before returning to me. "This is a private matter between family members." "Lily is my family," I said firmly. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of her." Diana's lips thinned with displeasure, but she nodded curtly. "Very well. I understand you've been making quite a scene, freezing accounts and hiring lawyers. That's unnecessary and, frankly, beneath the dignity of anyone associated with the Mitchell name." I almost laughed at her audacity. "Dignity? Is it dignified to conspire behind your daughter-in-law's back, to secretly funnel money to your son for the express purpose of cutting his wife out of his life?" "Don't be dramatic," Diana scoffed. "No one is cutting anyone out of anything. Mark is simply pursuing an opportunity that will secure his future. An opportunity you should be supporting as his wife, instead of obstructing. An opportunity that involves removing my name from our house deed and paying me to disappear," I challenged. "Yes, Mark told me about the post-nuptial agreement you've been planning." For a moment, surprise flickered across Diana's carefully composed features before she regained control. "The agreement would have been fair, more than fair given your contribution to the marriage." The way she said contribution made it clear she thought I'd brought nothing of value to my relationship with Mark. My anger, which had been simmering just below the surface, threatened to boil over. "Mrs. Mitchell," I said, my voice deadly quiet, "I've built a successful business from nothing. I've supported your son emotionally and financially when he needed it. I've maintained our home and our relationship while working 16-hour days. My contribution has been my entire heart and soul. What exactly has Mark contributed besides deception and betrayal?" Diana's eyes narrowed. "Mark has tolerated your obsession with this bakery." She waved her hand dismissively at my kitchen. "When he could have insisted on a wife who prioritised their home and family. He stood by you despite your inability or unwillingness to provide grandchildren." "That's enough," Lily cut in sharply. "You need to leave, now." Diana turned to her with a look of affronted dignity. "I'm having a conversation with my daughter-in-law." "No," I said, removing my apron and stepping forward. "You're insulting me in my place of business, and you're leaving. Whatever you and Mark have planned, it's not going to work. I won't be bullied, bribed, or manipulated into giving up what's rightfully mine. Tell your son that any further communication should go through my lawyer." For a long moment, Diana stood her ground, her cold blue eyes, so like Mark's, assessing me as if seeing me clearly for the first time. Then, with a small, tight nod, she turned and left, the bell above the door tinkling cheerfully in her wake. "Holy shit," Lily breathed once Diana was gone. "That was intense." I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. She's always been like that, just usually more subtle. I think I've finally seen the real Diana Mitchell. "And the real Mark," Lily added gently. I nodded, the truth of that statement settling heavily on my shoulders. The man I'd married, the man I thought I knew, would never have participated in this scheme, which meant I'd never really known him at all. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and baking. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. By closing time, I was physically exhausted, but mentally clearer than I'd been since discovering Mark's betrayal. Driving home, I decided to stop at our local grocery store for some essentials. I was in the produce section, deliberating between spinach and kale, when I heard a familiar voice. "Emma?" I turned to find Sarah, one of our neighbours, looking at me with concern. "Are you okay? I saw Mark packing some things into his car last night." Word travelled fast in our close-knit neighbourhood. I considered deflecting, but decided on honesty instead. "We're going through some things right now. Mark's staying with his mother temporarily." Sarah's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry to hear that. If you need anything, a meal, someone to talk to, whatever, just knock on my door, okay?" Her kindness nearly undid me. "Thank you," I managed, blinking back sudden tears. "For what it's worth," Sarah added, touching my arm lightly. "The way that man looks at his phone when you're not watching. I've seen it before. My ex was the same way before I found out about his affair." With that bombshell, she gave my arm a gentle squeeze and continued on her way, leaving me standing there with spinach in one hand and a new, horrible suspicion in my mind. Was Mark having an affair? The secrecy, the mysterious phone calls, the emotional distance, it all fit. But then why the elaborate financial scheme with his mother? Perhaps the partnership buy-in was real, but there was more to the story than just professional ambition. By the time I arrived home, my mind was spinning with new questions. I entered our dark, empty house, flipping on lights as I went. Everything looked the same as it always had. The photos of Mark and me on the mantel, his running shoes by the door, the throw blanket he liked draped over his side of the couch. But now it all felt like a stage set, props in a play about a marriage that had never been what I thought. I put away my groceries mechanically, then went upstairs to our bedroom. Mark had taken some clothes, but his presence was still everywhere. Cologne on the dresser, books on the nightstand, the indentation of his body still visible on his side of the mattress. On an impulse, I went to his closet and began searching through pockets, drawers, the boxes on the upper shelves. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I found it. A small velvet jewellery box tucked into the toe of a rarely worn dress shoe. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. Definitely not something Mark had ever given me. A small card was tucked into the lid. "For my D, all my love, M." D. Diana was his mother's name, but surely this wasn't a gift for her. The all my love inscription suggested something far more intimate. My mind raced back to the text message that had started this whole nightmare. Diana W. Not Diana Mitchell. Diana W. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the jewellery box still open in my palm. If Mark was having an affair with someone named Diana W., that would explain the secrecy, the emotional withdrawal, the need for the elaborate financial rearrangements. He wasn't just planning to advance his career, he was planning to leave me entirely. I took a photo of the necklace and the note, then carefully returned everything exactly as I'd found it. Then I called Lily. "I think Mark is having an affair," I said as soon as she answered, "with someone named Diana W." I explained about the necklace and my neighbour's comment. Lily listened without interrupting. Then said, "We need to find out who this woman is. If he's been funneling money not just for a business opportunity, but to set up a new life with someone else, that changes the legal picture completely. She was right. Infidelity wouldn't directly impact the division of assets in Massachusetts, but deliberate financial deception to benefit a paramour might. At minimum, it would strengthen my position in any negotiation. How do we find out? I asked. Leave it to me, Lily said with a determination that reminded me why I'd always relied on her in a crisis. Tyler has resources through his work. We'll figure out who she is. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet house, turning over this new piece of information. The pain of Mark's betrayal had been sharp but clean when I thought it was about money and his mother's influence. The possibility that he'd been unfaithful added a new layer of humiliation that made me feel physically ill. I slept poorly that night, plagued by dreams of Mark with a faceless woman, both of them laughing at me. I woke before dawn, grateful for the excuse to get up and go to the bakery, where at least I knew who I was and what I was doing. Sunday mornings were always busy at Sweet Foundations, with after-church crowds coming in for coffee and pastries. I lost myself in the rhythm of work, serving customers with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, accepting compliments on my baking with practiced graciousness. No one needed to know that my personal life was imploding. Around noon, during a brief lull, Lily appeared at the counter, her expression a mix of triumph and fury. "I know who she is," she announced, keeping her voice low despite the nearly empty shop. "Diana Weathers. She works at Mark's firm, or did, until 3 weeks ago when she mysteriously left for a new opportunity. She's 27, blonde, and according to her Instagram, recently back from a weekend trip to the Cape. Care to guess who else was supposedly at a work retreat in Cape Cod 2 weekends ago?" My stomach lurched. Mark said he was meeting clients. "I'm guessing the only client he was meeting was Diana Weathers," Lily said grimly. "Tyler found her LinkedIn. She was a junior financial advisor. Started at the firm about a year ago." The timeline matched with when I'd first noticed Mark becoming more distant, more critical of my work hours, more insistent that my bakery would never provide the lifestyle he wanted. "There's more," Lily continued, pulling out her phone and showing me a series of photos. "These are from her Instagram. She's been careful not to post any pictures with Mark, but look at the backgrounds." I scrolled through images of a pretty blonde woman in various locations, a restaurant, a beach, a hotel lobby. Nothing incriminating until I got to a photo of her at what appeared to be a cabin, captioned "Weekend Getaway." In the background, slightly out of focus, was a familiar blue duffel bag, Mark's gym bag. "That's from 6 weeks ago," Lily said, "when Mark told you he was at that financial planning conference in Vermont." The evidence was circumstantial but damning. I handed the phone back to Lily, a cold clarity settling over me. "He's been planning to leave me for her." "Looks that way," Lily agreed gently. The money from his mother, the post-nuptial agreement, it was all preparation for a new life with Diana Weathers. The bell above the door jingled as a family of 4 entered the bakery. I straightened, pushing down the turmoil of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "I have to get back to work. Can you send me her information? I need to tell Melissa." Lily nodded, giving my hand a quick squeeze before leaving. I served the new customers with mechanical efficiency, my mind racing. By the time I locked up the bakery at 3 p.m, I had formed a plan. First, I drove to an electronics store and purchased a new laptop and phone. I couldn't risk Mark having access to any of my digital communications. Then I went home and methodically began gathering evidence, bank statements, tax returns, property documents, anything that might be relevant to the legal battle ahead. I photographed the contents of Mark's home office, careful not to disturb anything. By evening, I had assembled a comprehensive file that I emailed to Melissa from my new laptop. As I was making a simple dinner of scrambled eggs, I couldn't stomach anything more substantial. My phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Emma Mitchell?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Diana Weathers. I think we need to talk." My heart stuttered. The audacity of this woman calling me directly was breathtaking. "I have nothing to say to you," I replied coldly. "I understand why you feel that way," Diana said, her voice calm and measured. But I believe I have information that would be valuable to you regarding Mark and his mother's financial arrangements. That gave me pause. Why would you share information with me? Aren't you and Mark involved? There was a soft, humourless laugh on the other end of the line. We were. Past tense. Until I discovered that he's been lying to me just as much as he's been lying to you. My curiosity overrode my initial impulse to hang up. What kind of lies? The kind where he told me he was separated from his wife and finalising a divorce. The kind where he promised we'd be together openly once some financial matters were settled. The kind where he claimed his mother approved of our relationship and was helping him break free from an unhappy marriage. Each word was like a fresh slap. Not only had Mark been unfaithful, but he'd created an entire fictional narrative about our marriage to justify his affair. How did you find out the truth? I asked. My voice faint. His mother called me yesterday, furious. Apparently, Mark told her I was just a work colleague he was helping with career advice. When she found out we've been seeing each other romantically for months, well, let's just say Diana Mitchell doesn't appreciate being deceived any more than you or I do. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so painful. Mark had been playing all three of us against each other, telling each what she wanted to hear. What information do you have? I asked after a moment. Financial records, text messages, emails, everything showing how Mark and his mother were planning to pressure you into that post-nuptial agreement. Plus evidence of how he's been using company resources for personal gain, which his firm would definitely be interested in knowing about. Why would you give this to me? I pressed, still suspicious. What's in it for you? Diana Weathers sighed. Honestly? Partly revenge. He made a fool of me and I don't appreciate that. But also, woman to woman, what he's done to both of us is wrong. I didn't know he was still actively married. I didn't know about the financial manipulation. When I found out, I ended things immediately. I wasn't sure I believed her, but the information she was offering could be invaluable. I have a lawyer, I said. You can send everything to her. I'd prefer to meet in person, Diana countered. Some of this is sensitive and I'd rather not have a digital trail. How about tomorrow afternoon? There's a coffee shop called Perk Up on Commonwealth Avenue. 3 o'clock. I hesitated, torn between caution and the desire for ammunition against Mark. Fine, I agreed finally. I'll be there. After hanging up, I immediately called Lily to fill her in. Do you think it's a trap? I asked. Maybe Mark put her up to this to get information from me. It's possible, Lily admitted. But what information could you possibly give her that would be useful to Mark at this point? You've already frozen the accounts and hired a lawyer. I think she might genuinely want to help, or at least genuinely want revenge. I'll be careful, I promised, and I'll call Melissa in the morning to let her know about the meeting. The next day, Monday, was my usual day off from the bakery. I spent the morning on the phone with Melissa, updating her on everything I'd learned about Diana Weathers and the planned meeting. I'd advise against meeting her alone, Melissa said, not for safety reasons, but because you want a witness to anything she tells you. Can your sister go with you? She has work, I replied, but I could record the conversation. Massachusetts was a two-party consent state for recordings, but if I disclosed I was recording at the start of our conversation, that would satisfy the legal requirement. That would work, Melissa agreed. Just be upfront about it. If she's genuinely offering helpful information, she shouldn't object to being recorded. I arrived at Perk Up 15 minutes early, choosing a table in the corner where I could see the door. The coffee shop was moderately busy with an afternoon crowd, enough people to provide a buffer of anonymity, but not so many that our conversation would be overheard. At precisely 3 o'clock, a blonde woman in a sleek pantsuit entered, scanning the room until her gaze landed on me. Even prepared by the Instagram photos Lily had shown me, I was struck by how young and polished Diana Weathers appeared, exactly the type of woman I could imagine fitting into the world Mark aspired to join. She approached my table with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Emma, I'm Diana. I nodded, gesturing to the chair opposite me. Before we begin, I want to be clear that I'll be recording our conversation for both our protection. If this surprised her, she didn't show it. That's fine. I have nothing to hide. I placed my phone on the table between us and started the recording app. Now, what information do you have for me? Diana opened her designer handbag and removed a manila envelope, placing it on the table. Everything is in here. Texts, emails, financial documents, all showing how Mark and his mother planned to manipulate you out of your marital assets. And why do you have these? I asked, not touching the envelope yet. Mark used my laptop several times to check his email. I may have taken the liberty of saving certain messages before ending things. She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed at this admission of snooping. As for the financial documents, he kept those in a folder in his car. I made copies before returning them. That sounds like theft, I observed mildly. Diana shrugged one elegant shoulder. Call it what you want. The point is, these prove that Mark and his mother were conspiring to defraud you. I finally reached for the envelope, opening it to scan the contents. The first document was an email from Diana Mitchell to her lawyer, discussing the best way to incentivize Emma to sign the postnup without fully understanding its long-term implications. My stomach turned at the calculated manipulation evident in the message. There's more, Diana Weathers said, watching my reaction. Keep reading. The next document was a spreadsheet detailing the transfers from Diana Mitchell to Mark's secret account, along with projected expenses for the partnership buy-in. But there was another column labelled DW Arrangement, with substantial sums allocated, money apparently intended for Diana Weathers. What's this? I asked, pointing to the column. She leaned forward. That's where it gets interesting. Mark wasn't just planning to buy into the partnership. He was setting up a separate investment account for the two of us, a nest egg for our future together, except he told his mother those funds were for client development. As I continued through the documents, a clear picture emerged. Mark had been systematically deceiving everyone in his life, telling each woman what she wanted to hear while secretly planning a future that served only his own interests. Why are you really giving me this? I asked finally, looking up from the damning evidence. The revenge angle makes sense, but this goes beyond that. Some of these documents could potentially implicate you as well. Diana took a sip of her coffee before answering. When I started seeing Mark, he told me he was separated, finalising a divorce from a woman who had chosen her career over their marriage. I believed him. Then I found out he was living with you, sharing your bed, all while making plans with me. That makes me feel... She searched for the word. Dirty. Complicit in hurting another woman. I never signed up for that. For the first time, I saw genuine emotion crack through her polished facade. Whether it was remorse or simply wounded pride was hard to tell, but it seemed real. There's something else you should know, she continued after a moment. Mark's been lying about the partnership opportunity too. There is no buy-in option at Riverside Financial. I checked. Whatever he's planning to do with that money, it's not what he's told either you or his mother. This new revelation stunned me. If Mark wasn't using the money for a legitimate business opportunity, what was it for? Do you have any idea what he might be planning? I asked. Diana shook her head. No, but given his pattern of deception, it can't be good. I'd suggest having your lawyer subpoena his complete financial records as soon as possible. I nodded, gathering the documents and returning them to the envelope. Thank you for this. It will help my case considerably. One more thing, Diana said as I stood to leave. Mark doesn't know I've figured out the truth about you and his mother. As far as he's concerned, I just ended things because I wasn't ready for commitment. If he contacts you, it might be useful for you to keep him in the dark about our meeting. It was a sensible suggestion, though I wasn't entirely comfortable with the implied alliance between us. Still, I nodded in agreement before saying goodbye and leaving the coffee shop, the envelope of evidence clutched tightly in my hand. I drove straight to Melissa's office, having arranged an emergency meeting after my conversation with Diana Weathers. Melissa listened intently as I explained the meeting and showed her the documents. This is extremely helpful, she said, examining each paper carefully, especially this email from his mother about deliberately misleading you regarding the post-nuptial agreement. That's essentially an admission of fraud. What about Diana's claim that there is no partnership opportunity at Riverside Financial? I asked. Could Mark be planning to take the money and disappear? Melissa frowned, considering the possibility. It's not uncommon in contentious divorces for one spouse to hide assets or make preparations to leave the jurisdiction. Given what we now know about Mark's character, I wouldn't rule it out. So what do we do? I asked, a new fear gripping me. If Mark took the money and ran, I might never see a penny of what was rightfully mine. We act quickly, Melissa replied, her tone businesslike. I'll file for an emergency hearing first thing tomorrow morning. We'll ask the judge to freeze all of Mark's assets, including the account with his mother's transfers, and to issue a temporary restraining order preventing him from disposing of any marital property. She began typing notes into her computer. In the meantime, you should secure any valuables or sentimental items in your home that you wouldn't want to lose, and continue documenting everything, especially any communication from Mark or his mother. I nodded, trying to process the escalating situation. What had begun as a shocking betrayal was rapidly evolving into something that felt almost criminal in its calculated deception. One more thing, Melissa added, looking up from her screen. This Diana Weathers, do you trust her? Not particularly, I admitted. But the documents seem genuine, and her story is consistent with everything else I've learned. Still, be cautious. People's motivations aren't always what they claim, especially in emotionally charged situations like this. It was sound advice, and I took it to heart as I left her office. On the drive home, my phone rang. Mark. I let it go to voicemail, not trusting myself to maintain the facade of ignorance Diana had suggested. When I checked the message later, his voice was tense. Emma, we need to talk. This has gone far enough. Call me back. I didn't. That evening, I followed Melissa's advice and went through our home. Securing important documents and irreplaceable items, my grandmother's jewellery, family photos, the flash drive containing all my original recipes. I packed a small bag with essentials, just in case I needed to leave quickly, and hid it in the back of my closet. The next morning, I opened the bakery as usual, finding comfort in the familiar routine. Around 10 o'clock, Melissa called. We got the emergency hearing, she reported triumphantly. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. The judge was particularly concerned about the evidence of financial deception. You'll need to be there to testify. I agreed, arranging for Zoe to handle the bakery in my absence. Just as I was hanging up, the bakery door opened and Mark walked in. My first thought was how tired he looked. Rumpled clothes, dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed. My second thought was that I no longer felt anything for this man who had once been the centre of my world. Emma, he said, approaching the counter where I stood. You're not answering my calls. I told you to have your lawyer contact Melissa, I replied evenly, grateful for the physical barrier between us. I have nothing to say to you directly. He ran a hand through his dishevelled hair, a gesture that once would have made me want to comfort him. Now it just seemed manipulative. This has gotten completely out of hand. The frozen accounts, the lawyers. It's unnecessary. We can work this out between us. Like you've been working out your relationship with Diana Weathers. The words slipped out before I could stop them, breaking the facade of ignorance I'd intended to maintain. Mark blanched. What are you talking about? Please, I scoffed, past caring about strategic advantage. I know about your affair, Mark. I know about the necklace in your closet. I know about the weekend trips and the lies. For a moment, he seemed genuinely speechless. Then his expression hardened. Who I see is none of your business. We've been effectively separated for months, whether you recognised it or not. The audacity took my breath away. Separated? We live in the same house. We share meals. We share a bed. The only person who knew about this separation was you. A customer entered the bakery, looking uncomfortable at the obvious tension. I forced a professional smile. I'll be with you in just a moment. Turning back to Mark, I lowered my voice. This isn't the place for this conversation. Leave now, or I'll call the police and report you for harassment at my place of business. His face flushed with anger, but he controlled himself, aware of the customer watching. This isn't over, Emma. You're right about that, I agreed coldly. We have a court hearing tomorrow morning. I suggest you find yourself a lawyer before then." With that, I turned my back on him and greeted my customer with a warmth I didn't feel. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mark leave, the door closing behind him with unnecessary force. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Lily came by after work to help me review what I would say at the hearing. By the time I went to bed that night, I was exhausted but resolute. But whatever happened in court the next day, I would face it with dignity and strength. The courtroom was intimidatingly formal, all dark wood and hushed voices. Melissa guided me to our table, her confident presence reassuring. Across the aisle, Mark sat with an older man in an expensive suit, presumably his hastily retained lawyer. Diana Mitchell was conspicuously absent, a fact Melissa noted with interest. "She's been served with a subpoena as a material witness," she whispered. "Her absence won't look good to the judge." The hearing began with the judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewing the emergency motion Melissa had filed. She then invited each attorney to make an opening statement. Melissa went first, outlining the evidence of financial deception and potential dissipation of marital assets. Mark's lawyer followed, attempting to characterize the situation as a simple marital disagreement blown out of proportion. "Mrs. Mitchell has overreacted to what is essentially a misunderstanding about future financial planning," he argued smoothly. "My client was exploring business opportunities, as any ambitious professional might. There was never any intent to defraud or deceive." The judge listened impassively before turning to me. "Mrs. Mitchell, please take the stand." Under Melissa's careful questioning, I testified about discovering the secret account, the text message from Diana Mitchell, and the post-nuptial agreement plans. I presented the documents Diana Weathers had provided, explaining their provenance without mentioning her by name, as Melissa had advised. "And you believe, based on this evidence, that your husband intends to remove you from your home and potentially leave the jurisdiction with these funds?" Melissa asked. "Yes," I replied steadily. "The pattern of deception, the secret accumulation of funds, and the fact that we've confirmed there is actually no partnership opportunity at Riverside Financial all suggest he's planning something he doesn't want me to know about." But the judge allowed my testimony to stand. When it was his turn to cross-examine me, he focused on trying to paint me as paranoid and vindictive. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Mitchell, that you've been increasingly consumed by your bakery business, to the detriment of your marriage?" "I work hard at my business," I acknowledged. But Mark never expressed any serious concerns about my work hours until recently, after he began receiving large transfers from his mother. "And these transfers, isn't it possible they were simply gifts from a mother to her son?" "Gifts that coincidentally began right after his mother's health scare, and that he deliberately hid from me? That seems unlikely." The lawyer changed tactics. "Mrs. Mitchell, did you break into your husband's email account to obtain some of these documents?" "No," I said truthfully. "They were provided to me by a third party." "A third party who illegally accessed my client's private communications?" Melissa objected. And the judge sustained it. "Counsel, unless you have evidence of illegal activity by Mrs. Mitchell herself, that line of questioning is inappropriate." When Mark took the stand, he appeared composed but defensive. He claimed the secret account was for a surprise, a new, larger house he'd been planning to buy for us, with his mother's help. The post-nuptial agreement, he insisted, was merely a legal formality his mother's lawyer had recommended to protect her investment. "And what about your relationship with Diana Weathers?" Melissa asked during cross-examination, dropping the bombshell we'd been holding in reserve. Mark's face registered shock before he recovered. "She's a former colleague. I've been mentoring her professionally." "Is that why you spent a weekend with her at a cabin in Vermont 6 weeks ago? For professional mentoring?" His lawyer objected vigorously, but the damage was done. The judge had seen Mark's reaction, and it wasn't the response of an innocent man. After both sides had presented their cases, the judge took a brief recess to consider her ruling. When she returned, her decision was swift and decisive. "Based on the evidence presented, I find there is a substantial risk of dissipation of marital assets. I am granting the temporary restraining order, freezing all accounts and properties held by either party. Additionally, I am ordering Mr. Mitchell to provide a complete accounting of all financial transactions for the past year within 7 days. She fixed Mark with a stern look. Mr. Mitchell, the court takes a very dim view of attempts to hide marital assets or deceive one's spouse about financial matters. Should further evidence of such deception emerge, there will be significant consequences. After the hearing, Melissa was jubilant. "This is a major win," she assured me as we left the courthouse. The judge clearly didn't believe Mark's story about the house surprise. With the restraining order in place, he can't touch the money or sell any property without court approval. I felt relieved but emotionally drained. What happens now? Now we prepare for the next phase: discovery, depositions, possibly mediation. These things take time, but today's ruling puts us in a strong position for eventual settlement negotiations. Time. The word hit me with unexpected force. How much of my life had already been consumed by Mark's betrayal? How much more would be lost to the legal aftermath? My bakery, my dreams, my sense of self, all had been placed on hold while I dealt with this nightmare. "I want my life back," I said suddenly, the words emerging with surprising conviction. Not just financially, but me, the person I was before all this. Melissa squeezed my arm gently. "That's the healthiest thing I've heard a client say in a long time, and we'll get you there, Emma. One step at a time." In the weeks that followed, the legal process ground on with glacial slowness. Mark complied with the court order to provide financial documentation, though Melissa found several concerning discrepancies that required further investigation. Diana Mitchell finally appeared for a deposition, coldly formal and clearly unhappy about being involved in what she termed a private family matter. The bakery became my sanctuary more than ever. I threw myself into developing new recipes, expanding our catering services, and nurturing the sense of community that had always been at the heart of Sweet Foundations. Zoe stepped up admirably, taking on more managerial responsibilities when I needed to attend legal meetings. Our customers, many of whom had become friends over the years, supported us with their loyalty and kind words. 3 months after that fateful birthday party, I received a call from Melissa. "We've found it," she said without preamble. "What Mark was really planning to do with the money." "Tell me," I said, bracing myself. "He bought property in Costa Rica 6 weeks ago. A beachfront villa under a corporate name. The down payment came from that secret account, $75,000. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. He was planning to leave the country. It looks that way," Melissa confirmed. "And here's the kicker. We found airline reservations in his name and Diana Weathers' name. One-way tickets to San Jose for next month. He was still planning to go through with it, even after everything that's happened." I sat down heavily, the phone pressed to my ear. "Does his mother know?" "Not according to her deposition. She genuinely believed the money was for the partnership buy-in. When we present this evidence, she's going to be just as blindsided as you were." There was a certain poetic justice in that, though I took no pleasure in the thought of Diana Mitchell's pain. In her own misguided way, she'd been trying to secure her son's future, not finance his escape with a younger woman. "What does this mean for the divorce?" I asked. "It means we have him," Melissa said, satisfaction evident in her voice. "This is clear evidence of intent to dissipate marital assets and flee the jurisdiction. The judge will not look kindly on it. I'm filing a motion today to have the Costa Rica property declared a marital asset subject to division." The revelation changed everything. At our next court appearance, Mark's lawyer requested a brief recess as soon as Melissa presented the evidence about the Costa Rica property. When they returned, his demeanour had shifted dramatically. "My client wishes to explore settlement options," he announced, avoiding eye contact with the judge. The settlement negotiations were swift and decidedly in my favour. I retained full ownership of the bakery and the house. Mark would keep his retirement accounts and personal possessions, but the money in the secret account, what remained of it after the Costa Rica down payment, would be divided equally. The Costa Rica property would be sold, with proceeds split between us after Mark's initial investment was returned to the marital pool. Diana Mitchell, upon learning of her son's true plans, withdrew her financial support entirely. According to Melissa's sources, She had publicly disowned him at her country club, declaring him no longer a Mitchell in any way that matters. As for Diana Weathers, she apparently moved to Chicago for a fresh start, her dreams of a Costa Rican paradise with Mark shattered by his exposure. The divorce was finalised 6 months after Lily's birthday party. I signed the papers in Melissa's office, feeling a complex mixture of grief, relief, and determination. A chapter of my life was ending, but a new one was beginning, one entirely of my own writing. That evening, I invited Lily and Tyler, Zoe and her husband, and a few other close friends to the bakery after hours. I'd prepared a special selection of pastries and opened several bottles of champagne. "What are we celebrating?" Zoe asked as I handed out glasses. "New beginnings," I replied simply, "and the people who help make them possible." I raised my glass, looking around at the faces of those who had supported me through the darkest period of my life. To true family, the ones who stand by you when it matters most. As we toasted, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realised I'd been carrying. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it would not define me. What would define me were my choices going forward, to trust again, to build, to create, to live with authenticity and purpose. The bakery was thriving, with plans for a second location in the works. The house, now truly mine, had been redecorated to reflect my own taste rather than the compromises of marriage, and I was beginning, slowly but surely, to rediscover the woman I had been before Mark's deception, stronger now, more resilient but still essentially me. Life had taught me a painful lesson about trust and betrayal, about the difference between the family we're given and the family we choose. But it had also shown me my own capacity for survival, for fighting back, for rebuilding from ashes. As Lily hugged me goodbye at the end of our small celebration, she whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Em. You didn't just survive this, you triumphed." And she was right. This wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, my future. The path ahead might not be the one I had planned, but it was mine to walk, one step at a time, with the knowledge that I was strong enough to weather whatever storms might come. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.